Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Rushton, Hurley, and I are about to tell you something that you just might know about. What you say and what they hear, a challenge for teachers and instructional coaches. So as instructors and teachers, we're communicators, and we talk with instruction in mind. We presume our students are focused and listening with learning in mind, but sometimes our students or adult learners just don't understand what it is that we mean. That's a quick introduction to what we are about today. And always want to give courtesy to the slides and the images that we use. And I'll give my friend Rushton an opportunity to introduce himself, and then I'll come back in.
So my name is Rushton Hurley. It is a pleasure to be a part of the presentation with my good buddy, Steve Mcgriff. And I am a nonprofit guy. I run a little thing called Next Vista for Learning. It's at nextvista.org. I'm a former high school teacher, a former principal of a K-12 and principal of an online high school. And now I run my little nonprofit attempt to save the world from ignorance one video at a time.
I love being saved from ignorance. I'm an instructional, my name is Stephen Mcgriff. It's a privilege to be an instructional coach and instructional designer and working as a consultant with school districts throughout California and some parts of the world. Rushton and I have been working together for about 12 years now. It's a great opportunity to be here with him. Let's get into this. So, the core issue of what we say and what they hear is really an issue about communication, namely the static that comes in when we are speaking. We would like our students to be as attuned to what we are saying as this rabbit is attuned to its environment. Sharply focused eyes, ears erect, listening for every possible sound. But what is it that happens to us when we are in our instructional mode? We are working with our students, and static sometimes, or the perception of undecipherable messaging begins to interfere with our ability to communicate. But what if our students are acting logically or reasonably based upon their own profession, their own experiences, and their perceptions of the messaging that they're receiving? Rushton is going to take some time to talk with us about his work with students in primary and secondary schools, and then I will follow with my reflections on working with adult learners. Rushton.
So thanks, Steve. So the basic core is what is said versus what is heard. Okay, so we say things as instructors, the students hear things, and to what extent do they jive, right? And the short story is they don't sometimes. So what we're going to look at here is just a couple of examples that are questions that teachers ask all the time that unfortunately tend to be, well, a little counterproductive. And so in that this happens, we just need to be aware of it, as we think about these different pieces about how things normally work in a class when we're aware of something that has been there for years, but only has recently come to our attention. That can be quite powerful. So hopefully that'll be the case for you now. So one of the standard questions that teachers ask all the time, who doesn't understand? Perfectly good question, right? If you know who doesn't understand, you can help that person out. Great question. You are doing a good thing, right? Well, the issue is that when students hear you say, who doesn't understand, what they hear instead is, who would like to raise your hand and announce to the room that you're an idiot? Anybody? Anyone? So it's not the kind of thing that actually tends to generate a lot of questions. It is certainly the case that in some environments, kids are very comfortable saying, well, I didn't get this. And if you're a teacher who has set that kind of environment in your classroom, in your Zoom space, whatever it might be, that's fantastic. But it's just not the case for everyone. So knowing how to kind of jump into that is a little different. So maybe you're asking questions like, what questions do you have, instead of do you have any questions, which introduces kind of a different feel to these. Their expectation is there that you would have questions. Another question that is a really, really common one, and you're like, well, me too? Yes, you too. Me as well, as it turns out. But it's just this kind of common question. We ask, who knows the right answer? Isn't that a nice question? Allows people to kind of like chime in, say what they know. I mean, just totally good, right? Well, what they hear is different, and they act on what they hear in a way that suggests that different. Usually when we say who knows the right answer, most of the room will then defer to the 3 or 4 students who always get the right answer. And that's not what we should be doing. Our job is not to validate the living daylights out of 3 or 4 kids while everybody watches. Our job is to get all of these students comfortable with the idea that they can contribute to a discussion in a learning space. And so in doing that, we have to approach things a little bit differently. Now, I will tell you a little bit more about my nonprofit as a way of coming into this, this idea in a little more detail. My nonprofit, been around for 15 years, is a video library, and it's a video library by and for teachers and students everywhere. It's free to use, free to contribute to, free to download from. It's all for a student audience. It's all screened content. My own little attempt to save the world from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Now, what has populated the majority of the library are videos that have come in via contests that we run. So we do these contests where we ask students and or teachers can contribute things, students can, they can work together. There's a lot of possibilities. And what they do is they find things that kind of match our different categories. So we have light bulbs, which are academic topics, insights on different things that kids might need to learn. Global Views, which is about communities around the world. Seeing Service is about the joy and meaning that come from helping others. And so when we do these different contests, the idea is to channel them into specific things in the library. I'll add as a shameless plug real quick that we also have videos about learning English and careers and advice for teens and all sorts of things. So if you're interested in that, just stay in touch with me. So our basic contest is a 90-second kit. We call it the edu video stuff, right? Simple little things in 90 seconds or less that creatively explain something you might find in school. So you can imagine that a kid is sitting there going, I don't get what my teacher is saying. And if they had a video where someone said, look at it this way, they could move from thinking, oh, it's me, I'm no good at this subject, to if someone explained it to me differently, I could get it, which I think is a truth, right? And as long as kids aren't losing their confidence in learning, we're going in the right direction. So we run these contests. And there are rules related to the contests. Another contest we run, by the way, is about service, and we ask kids to get to know groups or people or nonprofits in their community who do good by others, and to make these 2-minute videos about what they do, which is really quite cool. Now, one of the most important rules that we have is this: follow all the rules, right? Now that seems wildly clear, right? Totally clear, follow all the rules, or your video won't be considered. That's clear, except that they are coming at this from the experience of having people told them this kind of thing before. So, mainly we have issues related to sources and citations. You must use images, like if you're using images, it must be your own, or that you have gotten from a site where you have the permission to use them, right? And you have to cite them in a certain fashion. So this is great for teachers who are like, I'm really into that. And especially if they want somebody else doing the police work on it. But the thing is that when we get videos in these contests, as much as I try to get the message out, hey, this is really important. We won't consider your video unless it's there. But approximately 50% of the videos that come in, hundreds of videos over time, right? They didn't follow that direction. And so you might think, well, are they just boneheaded? What's up? Actually, I think the issue is that they are products of their experience. So when we look at why don't they follow that rule? They may well have had teachers tell them before, you must use these images, you must cite your sources, blah, 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 blah. And they didn't, and it didn't really hurt them. So maybe the teacher ignored it completely. Maybe the teacher said, well, you didn't cite your sources, that's 3 points out of 100. And the kid was like, for the hassle that would have been citing my sources, I can pay with 3 points, sold. Right? And so their experience is that people say these kinds of things, but don't mean them. We are products of our experience, right? And in thinking about things that way, it gets us more into a space of being able to say, all right, there are good reasons that they do what they do. They see grades in a particular way, they see instructions in a particular way, and we have to set up a system by which that experience doesn't interrupt them doing what they need to do. And so as we get to suggestions a little later, we can certainly hit that.
All right. Thank you, Rushton. looking at adult learners, as I work with them in their professional development environments, I have two examples to share with you. The first is working with teachers in the Philippines. Rushton and I have had the privilege of him in person, me remotely, giving verbal instructions to students where we have cultural and some language differences. And as an instructional designer and as a teacher, I often have to write instructions and set expectations in writing. I can't rely upon my verbal skills. I can't rely upon my observation skills. And in both of the instances, learners are looking for, as Rushton said, rules to follow, especially for our teachers in the Philippines. And we also experience that overachievers in the classroom often do more than they're actually asked to do, making the assignment much more elaborate than we expected. And then there are others who do much less. They do just enough to get by. Both of these conditions present challenges to us as instructors who are trying to communicate clearly about the expectations of what to do. But I don't mean to be derogatory of any of our colleagues in the Philippines, because we also know this experience is very true in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Los Altos Hills, where we had the privilege of working with teachers in a wonderful program called Merit, and the same phenomena occurred. We had no particular language or cultural differences to overcome. Those were not obstacles to communication. So we kept wondering what could be going on here. Well, it's simply called human nature. We're asking our teacher participants to act on something new, but they're responding based upon their prior experiences. And it may be that previously they just sat and listened through professional development experiences, believing that their mere presence was enough. But our style has been to teach based upon learners' actions and reactions to the content. We want a dynamic environment, not just a sit and get experience. That would be rather boring for us. We know it would be boring for the audience as well, but a lot easier. Now, many times our audience don't expect this kind of dynamic interaction from us. They didn't think they would have to do anything to learn just because they showed up for PD. So that draws us to a question. What might we do to help a situation of overcoming the expectations of the learner, whether they're a student or whether they are an adult learner? This is where Rushton and I get an opportunity to trade back and forth on what might we do. Rushton, you're up first.
All right, so having suggestions, oops, let me shift back to that right there. Having suggestions about what folks experience, right? Like how do you kind of short circuit that move towards what they hear instead of what we're saying, perhaps quite clearly. And we'll start with a suggestion related to homework. So if what we can do is we can build an environment where students are trying something a little different, where they're given space to act on their own initiative, that can move us in a good direction. So one of the things I started doing with the class I teach at Junipero Serra High School in San Mateo, California, I co-teach a class called Creative Solutions for the Global Good, which I offer up as one of the coolest names for any class anyway. And I started doing some things with my students this semester that I quite liked. Now let's understand that when students receive homework, they are looking to get it done, right? So that, let's hope that that's what they're into, at least that. And so if you think about something like write a one-page paper, is the goal to write something amazing, to have everybody think in new direct? No, typically what the student's goal is to get to the end of the page. What if I write larger? Will that work? Can I skip lines, right? So the learning piece has been completely subverted by this sense of one page. All right, so if we're not trying to get them to just do the same thing, which I kind of hope we're not, right? I mean, yes, we want to understand that they get the concepts and can work with it intelligently. But I've started adding some things to the homework as I go. So for example, at the end, I'll say, format your answers in a cool way. Now that's one of those ideas that can get a student like, wait, do what? And well, wait, what do you want? I want you to format your answers in a cool way. But but you know, I mean, you have those students who are you know, when the idea is to kind of act on their own initiative. But what I found was after a moment of, you know, they actually started doing some really cool things with the homework. And that became this fun piece of what they did as well. I've also asked them to add something fun that wasn't asked for in the instructions. Just something fun. They're like, wait, what? What do you want? Is it fun? Yes, good, right? You know, I'm not actually grading them on having done that, really. They're just having that, because we're going to talk about it as a group. We're going to talk about what they do as a group. So the fun things, it helps the conversations with the content move forward in interesting ways, because they've got this added little bit that is specific to their own creativity, which I think is important. Another cool thing you might do is say, show a connection to something that might surprise your classmates. Yeah, what's going to surprise them? So now they have to think about it in a new way as well. That's essentially the big piece for me. Is I want them to look at their work from the perspective of, what can I add? How do I make it mine, right? And I think that's an important move for trying to get anyone to think more about what they can do when they're going to share it with others.
Rushton, I really appreciate hearing that insight about your students. You gave them a role and a responsibility to fulfill. You changed how they thought about their place in the classroom. And that is the topic of recruiting. When working with adult learners, there's someone in that group who is really pretty smart. They might actually be the smartest person in the room. It's identifying who they are, the one who can actually work with the other teachers. They will have a voice that Rushton or I as instructors may not have to clearly articulate the message. Those who come out of the group, who are able to coach those who are in the group, are able to recognize that they can translate the instructor language and messaging into the language of the teacher participants. In the merit program that we referenced, the cadre of teacher participants who came into the program were selected because they had a very high level of interest in ed tech disposition, especially those who had been participants in other kinds of PD. They valued the experience with us. Now, some of them were honored by their peers in the group, especially those who struggled with the ed tech components. They often created the most intriguing and most interesting projects. They overcame a struggle, got through it, and accomplished an assignment, and their colleagues looked at them and said, that's worth celebrating. That's great. That's a great honor. In our work in the Philippines project, in a similar way, there was a cadre of teachers who completed the first program who were selected to be teaching assistants or coaches in the second program. It was elevating their status. It gave them a sense of honor. They stepped into the role with a whole new perspective of serving the other students in the group, and they were exceptional at using language skills, Tagalog and so on, in order to communicate our messages to the rest of the participants in a way that helped them feel comfortable and got them through. So this core team of Filipino educators helped translate an understanding of the English academic language that Rushton and I might use either written or in verbal. That's back to you, Rushton. What about feedback and revision?
So when you think about working with language, and we come back to this idea of say and hear, clearly a language issue, there are things we can put in place that can eliminate some of the headaches of transitioning students and adult learners from where they are in terms of their expectations to bringing something more to it. And for that, I want to talk specifically about this idea of how do you work with feedback. So when I have students do things related to feedback, my goal is to get them really talking with each other about the different things that they're doing, and to move them from, oh, that's great, I don't know, right? You know, I mean, something concrete, so that they can say, here, you know, what if you tried this? What if this were a possibility? You know, would it make any sense too? And then fill that in from there. So as you look at questions like that, how do you organize them with your students? So several suggestions on that front. One, let everybody know substantive feedback is the piece. Now, this is, if for students who are brand new to this, you're going to have to tell them things like, when someone gives you a suggestion and you don't like it, you still say thank you and note it. And then if you want to ignore it later, that's fine. But you know, there are tactful ways of dealing with anything. You can always ask a clarifying question, of course, but generally, thank you, noted, and then go back and reflect on it. What is it that you're working with? Now, so like this is great is not substantive feedback. What if you switched this image for this reason is, right? So that first piece is that. Then what you have students do is they have to get a certain number of pieces of substantive feedback and they track those. So maybe it's in a document, maybe it's in a spreadsheet or something like that. And for each one, they have to be able to say, I chose to follow this for this reason. I chose not to follow this for this reason. So they have to be able to talk about what they see as they go. So that is one method for adding essentially a separate assignment, but related to the first assignment that is built on having them begin to work with feedback. And ideally what they learn is that, hey, I can get a lot better at what I do and in the quality of my work if I can get good feedback from others. A third piece of this is that if you have students in teams and their job is, you know, when thinking back essentially to like the sources and citations with the videos piece, their job is to police each other. You don't have to do as much of it yourself. So for example, let's say that there is this rule related to citing your image, citing the sources of your images that you use. And what they do is they show each other and each one has to sign off saying, yes, I've looked at this person's images and he or she followed all the rules, and check it, right? And so that way, if somebody turns in something and they didn't follow the rule and 2 or 3 people have already said they did, we have an issue, right? They're not getting together and saying, I don't know that you did this right. Let's talk about this. So if they're noting those things, maybe through a Google form or any particular company's form, anything like that, where what they do is they say, yeah, I noticed this. Then you have something to go on rather than looking for every last thing yourself. A lot of teachers kind of reach into that martyr space of doing it all. And there's not really a need, especially if what you're trying to do is train the students to spot these issues, not just for others, but also for themselves. I think that when we think about that, you have a produce suggestion.
Absolutely. And the first thing about produce is recognizing that feedback is something that we can use to help us evaluate whether or not our messages are being heard or not. Wonderful example of how lettuce grows. If you find that the lettuce in your garden isn't growing in the way that you expect it to, there's something that you can do about it. And it may require you to make a change. So I suggest we change perspectives first. It's not the blame on the student side or the environmental conditions side, but rather let's just acknowledge that in this particular learning space, we have an opportunity to improve the teaching and learning paradigm if we're the one who's willing to make that change. We are the educators. We understand this concept perhaps better than our audience does. So change ourselves first. Take a look at the audience, at the environment, and see, is there a change that we can make there? Whether my work is in the Western or non-Western world, along with Rushton's, we're working with educational systems that often think differently than we do. I know that even our friends and colleagues on the opposite sides of the coast have a different perspective of how teaching and learning could possibly happen. What I am learning how to do is pull back from using my polysyllabic words in an academic language that doesn't mean very much to my learners in the Philippines. Well, sometimes it doesn't mean very much to my American students in my class. And I need to make sure I pull back and use clear and plain language that is better, that could be deciphered more clearly. So the problem isn't so much a language issue, or a cultural issue. It's about, can we communicate through those kinds of obstacles in order to simplify our language and to focus on the most necessary aspects of what we're trying to convey. Bringing this into a close, the challenge of what you say and what they hear is a challenge of communication. It's a way of taking some actions to understand the filters of either clear communication or confusing communication, and a way to set expectations with our students and to have them understand what is our expectation of what we say and what we expect them to do with the words. We need to get past a lot of static disruption. because there's two sets of it. There's a set in front of me, and then there's another set in front of our students. And knowing where those disruptions might occur and what the nature of that static is gives us an opportunity, like in the lettuce illustration. Do we need to add a nutrient? Do we need to change something about the environment? Or as this illustration, this picture shows, maybe we need to figure out how to dial in and move a couple switches in the dynamic of the teaching and learning paradigm in order to fine tune and bring our students into focus and to bring ourselves into focus, attuned to what they are hearing and what they are responding to. And in this way, we improve the chances that what we say is what they hear. We've got some resources for you. Both Rushton and I are always glad to answer your questions and be available to you. Reach out to us, contact us, find out what we're up to and what kinds of things we're involved in. Rushton's website alone is a treasure trove of videos and insightful pieces, and his writing is extraordinary on many levels. I highly recommend your explorations there. If you want to bounce ideas around about instructional design or technology, always glad to answer your questions for you for any academic level. With that, we want to say thank you for your time and your participation listening to us. Here's where we are. You can get this slide deck. And with that, we wish you well. I know Rushton's always got a great line for ending these presentations.
You know, the line that I use to finish my newsletter every month is one I can
Oh,
use.
yes.
Absolutely. May you
Tell
inspire.
us.
May you inspire and be inspired each and every day.
Good words to live by.